Goblin launch detected.
Hey gang! Using the promo code MTG Muddstah, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCG Player. And if you'd like to join the generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. We are nearing the end of Magic Fest Montreal month. In today's game, we have Vincent returning with his Maraxus deck, keeping 2 mountains to Ready Scrap Savant, Vandal Blast, Reverberate, and Sword of the Anime. New to the channel is Julius playing his Tuvasa deck, keeping Retether, Pier's Whim, Supreme Verdict, Sun Petal Grove, Azorius Chancery, Blossoming Sands, and Mana Confluence. Tim is playing his newly bought Kadena deck with a few upgrades, including Ulamog the Infinite Gyre, an Island, Cultivate, Thespian Stage, Waterlogged Grove, Inox Survivalist, and Thornwood Falls. Andres has only his CDH decks, so he's borrowed my Krenko deck because he loves goblins as well, and he keeps Cavern of Souls, 2 Snow-Covered Mountains, Mog War Marshal, Throne of the God Pharaoh, and Faithless Looting. Tim wins the die roll and starts us off. Tim plays a tapped Thornwood Falls, gaining 1 life. Andres plays a Cavern of Souls and names goblins. Vincent plays a mountain. Julius plays a tapped Blossoming Sands and gains 1 life as well. Tim plays his Waterlogged Grove untapped and passes. Andres plays a Snow-Covered Mountain and he casts Faithless Looting, drawing 2 and discarding 2. He then pays 1 red for a Goblin Lackey before passing. Vincent plays another mountain and passes. Julius draws and plays a Temple of Mystery, scrying 1 and leaving it on top. Tim plays a Thespian Stage and casts Cultivate. Before letting him search though, Vincent responds and reverberates the ramp spell, and the 2 gentlemen go to find 2 basics, 1 for the field and 1 for their hand. Andres plays a Snow-Covered Mountain and heads to combat. He hits Julius for 1 damage with a Lackey, and puts out a Beetleback Chief, gaining 2 Goblin tokens. He then pays 2 to drop a Throne of the God Pharaoh, before moving to his end step, which triggers and sees 1 tapped creature, dealing 1 to his opponents. Vincent draws and plays a mountain, paying 3 for an Armory Automaton. Sadly, there's no equipment in play to steal or equip to it, and he passes. Julius plays a Mana Confluence and taps out for Tuvasa in his main phase, losing 1 from tapping the Confluence. Tim plays an Island and taps all the lands but the one that'll hurt him for Kadena. He then plays a free Morph creature and draws from Kadena's trigger as it enters. Andreas plays a Mutavault for his turn and pays 4 mana for a Treasonous Ogre in his main phase. He moves to combat, but with a table full of opponents who have blockers now, there's no real line of attack. He moves to his second main phase, and then pays 12 life into the Ogre to make 4 red mana, which just so happens to be enough for Krenko, which he casts and passes. Vincent plays another mountain for turn, and he pays 2 for the Sword of the Anime and equips it onto the Automaton before he swings it at Andreas. This triggers the Automaton, but the sword's already attached. Andres blocks the Goblin token, while Vincent goes to find a basic. Julius loses another 1 to his Confluence to help cast Propaganda. He draws from Tuvasa as the enchantment comes into play, and plays an Azorius Chancery, bouncing the Temple of Mystery back to hand. Tim drops a land and loses 1 life to help cast Secret Plans. He then taps 4 mana worth of lands to cast Bounty of Luxa and passes. Andreas plays a Tectonic Reformation in his main phase and swings the Lackey at Vincent for revenge. Vincent takes the hit, but Andreas has no free goblins to unleash. He then passes, dealing 1 to his opponents thanks to the Throne trigger. Vincent plays a Cryptic Caves as his land for turn, and swings the Automaton at Julius, paying the 2 for Propaganda. Julius takes the hit, while Vincent goes to find a basic. In his post-combat main phase, a Vandal Blast goes on the Throne of the God Pharaoh, and it buys a lot of goodwill for Vincent from the table. Julius loses another 2 life as Temple Garden comes in untapped, and he enchants Tuvasa with one with the wind, drawing from casting the enchantment. Julius then pays 3 mana, losing 1 life from the confluence from Heuristic Study. Tim starts his turn off by asking which of Julius's enchantments are the most concerning. He puts a flood counter on the bounty, and draws as he moves to his main phase. Tim then plays a basic, and casts his free morph creature for his turn, drawing as it enters from Kadena. Tim then passes, and before moving to the end step, Andreas activates the Mutavault and taps Krenko once the land is a creature to make some goblin tokens. Andreas draws and plays out a National's Altar before passing. He doesn't pay the 1, and Julius draws. Vincent pays 4 mana for Daretti Scrap Savant in his main phase, and upticks the Walker, discarding a card to draw 1. Heading to combat, the Automaton heads at Andreas, who blocks the 3 tokens to trade. Vincent still gets to find a basic after binning the artifact. Julius draws and plays an island before paying 3 mana for a Dueling Grounds. This triggers Tuvasa's ability, letting him draw a card. Julius then swings Tuvasa at Daretti to take out the Walker, and at the end of his turn has to discard down to 7. At this point, Tim also responds by revealing his Inox Survivalist and blowing up the study and drawing from the Secret Plans trigger. Tim draws for turn and gains some mana from his Bounty main phase trigger. He then simply hardcasts a Chrome Shell Crab in his main phase and plays a Terramorphic Expanse as his land for turn. We then see him using some of that floating mana to cast Putrefy and target Tuvasa. Julius moves to counter with a Swan Song, but Andres gets into it by pushing the removal through by countering the counterspell with a Pyroblast. Tim then plays Echoing Truths and targets Andres' Goblin tokens, but despite him, Andreas sacrifices them all to the altar to float some colorless mana. Moving to combat, Kadena hits Julius for 3, and Tim passes. At the end of turn, Andreas once more activates the Mutavault and taps Krenko for more tokens. Andreas draws and swings his Treasonous Ogre at the opponent on the throne, getting a +1/+1 counter and dealing 3 damage to Tim. Vincent plays Shred of Sanity in his main phase and returns Vandal Blast and Reverberate to hand, discarding a Price of Progress and then exiling the shreds. Vincent then blows up Ashland's Altar with his Vandal Blast and passes. Julius main phases his Supreme Verdict and wipes the board of troublesome morph creatures and goblin tokens. He plays an island and loses 1 to cast a Satyr Enchanter before passing to Tim. At the end of turn, Tim cracks his Terramorphic to find a basic. Tim draws a card and puts a counter on the bounty before recasting Kadena in his main phase. He plays a morph creature, drawing as it enters, and then a Talisman of Curiosity, and passes. Andreas draws for turn and plays Bogart Shenanigans, and passes. Vincent draws and plays another mountain. He casts Apex of Power in his main phase and gains some mana and reveals some cards into exile. He casts his Inspiring Statuary, Commander Sphere, locks on Warhammer, and this leaves him with 1 red. He then taps his artifacts thanks to the statuary and uses the 1 red to cast Volcanic Offering. He picks Andreas as his opponent to target a non-basic and a creature, with Vincent picking the Simic Growth Chamber and Kadena. And Andreas picks the Azorius Chancery and the Enchanter on Julius' side. Vincent then passes. Julius draws for turn and replays his Temple of Mystery, scrying the card to the bottom. He taps out again, losing 1 life to recast Tuvasa. Tim draws for turn and removes a bounty counter, gaining some mana. He uses that floating mana and the rest of his lands and rocks to cast Ulamog the Infinite Gyre. The on-cast trigger destroys Propaganda, and the table is now a bit afraid of Tim. Andreas draws and casts Prismatic Lens before passing turn. Vincent taps 4 artifacts and 2 mountains to cast his commander, and the muscly man Maraxus meanders into play. He equips the Sword of the Animate to it, and then the Warhammer before passing to Julius. Julius plays a Fabled Passage, cracking it to find a basic, and untaps it because he has 4 more lands. He pays 5 mana to steal away Ulamog from Tim with a Corrupted Conscience, because obviously what an Eldrazi needs is Infect. He also draws a card from Tuvasa, and Julius passes. Tim draws and puts a counter on his bounty, drawing from it. he plays a forest and turns up his morph creature, which is an Ice Feather Aven. This lets him return to hand the Ulamog that Julius had just stolen. Tim then plays a Thran Dynamo and passes. Andres plays a Snow-Covered Mountain, recasting Krenko before passing. Vincent counts up his permanents to establish just how buff the buff boy be. He's a 19/irrelevant with lifelink and trample, and reduces the power by 4 as he casts a Hammer of Nazan. It comes in and equips itself onto his commander. Andreas does his best to convince Vincent not to attack him, which Vincent agrees to by being a mono-red buddy. Maraxus instead goes at Tim for 17, and Tim blocks with the Ice Feather Aven. However, before moving to damage though, Vincent casts Downhill Charge, pumping Maraxus by another +9/+0. Unfortunately for Tim, this is a lethal amount of commander damage, and even with the block, he still loses, while Vincent gains a lot of life thanks to the Loxodon Warhammer. Julius plays a Bountiful Promenade as his land for turn, and deals with the troublesome Maraxus by turning him into a land with Imprisoned in the Moon. He also draws from Tuvasa's trigger. Andreas plays a Tap Myriad Landscape and passes. Vincent floats 1 red mana before sacrificing his Commander Sphere to draw a card. He then sacrifices the Cryptic Caverns to draw as well. Vincent then plays a Sky Scanner, drawing as it enters, and he pays to equip it with the Hammer of Nazan before passing turn. Julius casts Bruna in his main phase, and as she enters, he brings back the 2 auras from his yard and attaches them to her, which is a slight mistake. At the end of turn, Andreas animates the Mutavault and taps Krenko to make 2 Goblin tokens. Andreas casts Dragon Fodder in his main phase, making 2 Goblin tokens, and passes. Vincent plays a Drownyard Temple as his land for turn, and casts Champion's Helm, attaching it to the flyer. He then moves the Loxodon Warhammer over. He pays 3 for a Stratus Scythe, exiling a mountain from his library, and with 7 on the field, it pumps his Sky Scanner by +7/+7 after he attaches it thanks to the Hammer of Nazan trigger. He then swings the Sky Scanner at Julius for 18, who responds by casting Heroic Intervention to give his stuff hexproof, but more importantly, indestructible. He puts Bruna in front of the flyer, soaking up 7 damage, and only taking 11, while Vincent gains 18 life, and his Sky Scanner gains 7 -1/-1 counters. Vincent then taps more artifacts in his post-combat main phase to help cast Seize the Day. He untaps his Sky Scanner, and gets ready for another combat step, but he doesn't attack though, since he wants to keep it as a blocker, and passes. Julius taps some mana for a Sigil of the Empty Throne. He draws from Tuvasa, and then plays out a Sylvan Library, getting an Angel token from the Sigil, seeing another enchantment hitting the field. Moving to combat, he swings the Corrupted Bruna at Andreas for 7 infect damage. At the end of turn, Andreas cracks his landscape to find 2 basics before making more tokens with Krenko after animating the Mutavault. Andreas draws and cycles a Snow-Covered Mountain from his hand. He pays another red thanks to the Tectonic Reformation to cycle the then isolated Watchtower, drawing again. He casts a Goblin Ringleader that he drew, revealing the top 4 and sadly just whiffing. He then swings a token at Vincent, who blocks with a Sky Scanner, gaining 18 life again, and with the token dying, Andreas deals 1 to Julius with the Bogart shenanigans. Vincent plays a Hammer of Perforos in his main phase, and activates it to sacrifice a land and make a 3/3 Golem. He moves the Sword of the Anime onto it, and swings it at Julius. Julius blocks it with Bruna, as Vincent searches for a land, and with nothing else, Vincent passes. Julius activates his library on his draw step, drawing 2 extra cards, and puts 2 of them back to not lose any life. He plays a Sterling Grove, gaining another Angel token from the Sigil and drawing from Tuvasa. Heading to combat, he swings Bruna at Andreas, and before moving to damage, Andreas activates Mutavault to become a Goblin, and then dies to infect. Julius then passes. Vincent draws for turn, and taps more artifacts to help pay for spells. This time he's casting Atali, who once it comes in, gets geared up with a Champion's Helm, and I'd kinda like to see how that's possible. He then moves the Hammer of Nazan onto Atali, and swings it at Julius. Responding to Atali's on-attack trigger, Julius phases out with Teferi's protection, but not before Vincent uses Reverberate that he'd returned earlier to also phase out, and now we have no one left in the game. It ends, goodbye. Unfortunately though, I do believe that they're supposed to exile a card to Atali's trigger at this point, but I'm not too sure, and it's kind of weird with both of them being phased out, so Vincent simply passes. Julius faces back in on his turn, and on his upkeep, casts an Enlightened Tutor. He finds and puts to top Unquestioned Authority, drawing it for turn after looking at his top 3 cards thanks to the library. He then casts the enchantment onto Bruna, drawing some cards as it enters for the enchantment, and from Tuvasa, not to mention gaining another Angel token. Julius then drops Karmic Justice, gaining another Angel token as the enchantment enters, and he then passes. Vincent casts Mind Stone and sacrifices to draw another card in his main phase. He moves the Stratascythe over to Atali, and the Skyscanner dies from all the -1/-1 counters on it. Vincent then pays 2 tapped artifacts and 1 red to cast a Seething Song, making 5 more red mana. He uses that red to help equip the Lockset on Warhammer to Atali, and swings it at Julius. Atali's trigger goes off first, revealing a land from Julius and Gamble from Vincent. Vincent casts it and finds a card for his hand. They then roll to see which of the 2 cards Vincent will lose, and he reveals a Burnished Heart, which I doubt is the card he found. Unfortunately, due to his own enchantment, Dueling Grounds, Julius can only block with 1 creature, and the 9/9 Tuvasa just won't stop enough to prevent him from losing to Atali. Game review time. So I think it was pretty interesting that the fact that Dueling Grounds, which kept Julius around for so long and basically stopped the Goblin army from going, may or may not have caused him to lose. There was the bit of the snafu involving the Bruna, but he still would have gotten it when he attacked with her anyway, so I don't think it was that big of an impact, especially considering Vincent won anyway, and he was the only party affected by it. Kadena continues to impress me as the best Morph Commander currently available. I used to think that Animar would be the best Morph Commander, but the built-in card draw and the fact that you have access to black, giving you tutors and all kinds of removal, just really knock her out of the park. I felt a little bit bad for Andres because he didn't really know the deck as well as he knew his own deck. He was still a great sport about it though, and I'm glad that he was able to play on camera. Vincent's Maraxus deck is a conundrum to me. It's like a mono-red Voltron deck that actually gets weaker the more that he taps out, so it's kinda counterintuitive for him to play things out. It's this beautiful kind of mess, and it's great to see him play, and it seems to work very well. I think one of the key cards in the deck seems to be Inspiring Statuary, which is a card that I've never really seen played outside of this deck. This is one of those things that I just love about EDH, where a deck is able to take a specific rare that really doesn't see a ton of play, and makes it its own. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMuddstah. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmuddstah, and lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmuddstah. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.